So we are in a series. We're in a series called Faith Over Fear because in 1 Peter we find this letter that really does reveal to us that the Bible is so timeless and timely. That though we're reading words that were written 2,000 years ago, we see they very much apply to our lives today, that we have so much to learn from what Peter writes. Peter is the pastor, the leader of the church in Rome. And he gets word of these Christians that are in a Roman province called Asia Minor, modern day Turkey for us. And in Asia Minor, he finds out that these Christians are being persecuted, that they're being harassed by their Roman and Greek neighbors. They're really having a hard time. And they're losing a lot of stuff. Let's talk about this on a practical level. They have lost a lot of their financial stability. Many of them have lost their ability to generate wealth. Some of them have been disowned by their family. Some of them have lost friendships and relationships that have been a key part of their life for years and years and years. Like, that's what these people are facing in order to follow Jesus. It is requiring a true and genuine sacrifice. They find themselves in a contentious culture. And Peter writes to them to encourage them. He writes to them to uplift them, and he writes to them to have faith even when their natural tendency would be to be fearful of the culture in which they live. And we have so much that we can learn from them as well. So over the past couple of weeks, we've seen how Peter has helped them to establish their identity, who they are, because their identity has changed. They are in a covenant relationship with Jesus. They are different people. And so that's what we've been looking at over the past couple of weeks. But how many of you know your identity absolutely informs your activity? Your identity informs your activity. Maybe you're in the room today and you don't even believe the Bible. Like, you don't believe anything that I'm saying. Someone brought you to church. Someone invited you. I love the fact that we have people that just come to our church because they're like, it's just the nicest people that I've ever met. And so I don't agree with everything, but I'm going to come there because, it's the only place where I feel good about myself. And so I hope that you also would understand. I think we can all agree on this, that our faith, Christianity, is not just something we believe, but the real question is, what are you going to do about what you believe? It's not just a system of belief. It is something that should inform our activity and how we live. Simi and I have the privilege to coach couples who are going to get married. So we do premarital counseling for these couples. And through the beauty of technology, sometimes these people are just all over the place, different nations, sometimes all over the country. And there was a couple recently, of course I won't say their name, but anyway, they met online, like they're kind of in a long distance relationship. They're getting ready to get married, right? And so I'm talking to the guy about how he handles conflict and how he communicates with his future wife through conflict. And he's like, oh, it's easy, bro. Like, if she disagrees with something or if we're not on the same page, I just don't talk to her for a couple days. And then I'll just kind of call out of nowhere. It's like, hey, how you doing? And she kind of just forgets about it, And I'm like, all right, 3 things for you, brother, right? Like, first of all, she didn't forget, man. Like, why do you think she forget? She just doesn't want to talk about it with you because you're a baby, right? Like, so you got to figure that out. And then, more important question, sir, like, when you get married, right, and now you're in a covenant, because marriage is really a picture of what happens with us and Jesus. You're in a covenant relationship with this person. You bind yourself to that person, and from that moment on, your identity is different, and because your identity is different, the way you live and act, right, your activity is different. So I was like, when you get married, and you guys don't live in different states, like, how do you think it's gonna go to not talk to her when she's in the same house with you all the time? Like, what is your long-term plan here? And he said, I never thought about that, right? Never thought about that. And I was like, that's why we're talking right now. But you see that it's a similar picture to what should happen to us when we follow Jesus. That there should be something different as we follow Christ. Transformed people living a transformed life. And that's what Peter is going to get to in this section that we're looking at today. Your first allegiance is to your king, who is Jesus Christ. And because now your allegiance has changed, where your allegiance was to yourself, your allegiance was to this world, now you live for him because your allegiance has changed. The way you live will change and your life will look different. So Peter's going to talk now. After he set up this new identity for these people in Asia Minor and reminded them who they are in Jesus, now he's going to show them how that means they should live, how their identity informs their activity. So we're going to talk today a lot about this word culture and the culture in which we live. I want to begin by just defining it really quickly for the sake of our talk, because maybe we have different ideas when we talk about the culture. Maybe we think of different things. So here's a definition from Texas A&M University. I'm sorry, I had to use Texas A&M University. It's the best definition for the purpose of my talk. So after I read this, I guess like we do push-ups and yell, right? Some of you will get that, some of you will get that, some of you won't get it. But this is culture. A culture is a way of life of a group of people. The behaviors, the beliefs, the values, and symbols that they accept, generally without thinking about them. And they are passed along by communication and imitation from one generation to the next. So there is a culture that we live in. Right? It is the culture that surrounds us. We live in a time, we live in a place, we live in a particular worldview. Like we live in a culture. And we're going to learn how our identity, if you're a follower of Jesus, your identity informs the way that you live in this culture. And over the next couple of weeks, Peter's going to lay out for us several things. What does that mean in your marriage? What does that mean when you go to work? What does that mean in the way that you engage others and engage even government? We're going to see how much time we have to get to all those things today. But it begins with this, and that's 1 Peter 2, verses 11 to 12. I think I've read these verses every week, but today we're going to really dive into what they mean. Peter writes, "Dear friends," these are his friends, these are believers, these are people who are a part of the church in Asia Minor, fellow Christians, "Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that he visits us." And so, diving into this verse a little bit, what Peter begins with is "I urge you as foreigners and exiles." And that word foreigner, it doesn't just mean that you are outsiders. It doesn't mean you're outcasts. It doesn't mean that you have come from another place. Like the word that he uses there in the Greek is this word paroikos. And it's fascinating because what it actually means is, paroikos means to live next to walk beside, like somebody is walking and you're walking beside them, because that word gives us a different understanding than even the word foreigner might give us. Because what Peter is saying there is, you do live in a culture that might be hostile to the gospel, that might be hostile to you, that might be opposed to Jesus Christ. But your answer to that, church in Asia Minor, is not that you just get all the Christians together. It's like, okay, guys, this is really hard. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to move up to the mountains and we're just going to find a little place where all of us can just live together and we'll make this little Christian bubble and we'll live inside our Christian bubble. Then life will be fine, right? That's a cult. We know that's weird. Even Peter knew that's weird. And he's like, that's not what you're called to do, just because the culture might be opposed to Jesus or the way that you look at the world or what you believe. He says, you've got to live in the culture. You're going to be living beside them, next to them, walking alongside of them. The first thing, if you're taking notes, is this: we live beside our culture, but we don't live like our culture. So we don't just get to suck ourselves out of this place and go and start a cult somewhere. We're going to live, we're going to go to school with, we're going to work with, we're going to live next to, we're going to be in family with people who might not believe what we believe, and not only that, maybe even opposed to what we believe, or the way that we see the world, or how we think things should be. We're going to walk beside them, but not be like them. That's the picture here. Walk next to them, don't walk with them. Your primary allegiance is to a different king. Your primary allegiance is to Jesus. And so we looked at this last week. Peter said, you are a holy nation. You're a royal priesthood. You're a chosen people. You are the beloved of God. So there should be something different about you. Live near, live beside, walk next to, but you are not one among the culture in which you live. You will be seen as foreigners and exiles often. It reminds me of one time I was working with a church in Portland, and this church, they're so generous, they took really good care of me, so they put me up in a really nice hotel in downtown Portland. I know the hotel is nice because across the street from the front door was a Tiffany's. And I've heard of Tiffany's, right? Never been in Tiffany's, but I've heard of Tiffany's. I kind of knew what it was, understood the gist, and I was like, it'll be nice. I'll get my wife something from there, and then she'll be so happy when I come home. So I walk into Tiffany's, and there were no prices on anything, right? So immediately I knew I don't belong in Tiffany's, right? Like, it's just, I've heard about it, but this is why I've never gone there. In fact, sometimes I tell my wife when we're shopping, I'll be like, Simi, if it ain't got a price, that means it's too nice, right? And we just keep walking. So I walked into Tiffany's, realized what was happening, quickly walked out, and then I was just like, this is a beautiful place, a beautiful part of the city. So I'm just gonna take a long walk. So I go on a walk for like an hour around downtown Portland. And as I get back to the front of my hotel, there are these two huge charter buses in the front of the hotel. And there's this massive crowd of people that's assembled around the front door. And I was just like, I'm just trying to get to my room, right? Because I'm gone for an hour-long walk. I need to decompose. And so I'm trying to get in the front door, and I'm having to fight through the crowd to get in the front door. And this lady, these people are standing behind stanchions. And this lady from the crowd shouts at me, and she says, hey, are you somebody? And I didn't know what to do. I'm just trying to get to my room. So I just yelled back like, I'm Jason. Because I didn't know what she was asking. I didn't know what was going on. I'm Jason. And she said, Jason who? Portland, man. Jason who? I was like, Jason John. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm just saying my name. I was like, maybe it's because pastors are here. I don't know. Jason John. And then she looks to the people around her, just in general, not even to a single person. She just kind of looks around and she says, he's nobody. That's what she said. And I was like, what is going on? So I go in the hotel. And I ask around. I was just like, what's happening here? Like, what just happened to me? Because I'm really down on myself right now. And I need someone to encourage me. Like, what is happening? And I didn't realize all this was going on. I'm just busy with work. It's in the middle of the NBA playoffs. This hotel is not far from the Rose Garden. So the Golden State Warriors are in town to play the Trailblazers. And they're staying at my hotel, right? And it quickly became evident to me that I could be staying in the same hotel as them, I can be near them, but I am definitely not one of them, right? Like, I'm nobody, according to her. And that's even the idea that Peter's given us. Hey, you can be near the culture. You can be alongside of it. You can be beside it, but you should be different. The people he's writing to, they used to be at home in this place. And now, he's telling them, now, you're no longer at home here. You're gonna be foreigners and exiles, even in this place that you have lived for a long, long time. It's something for us to think about. As you examine your life, my friends, if there's no distinction between you and the culture in which you live, there's something to re-examine. There's something to understand, a deeper understanding, a process of self-examination, a Holy Spirit empowered conviction that should lead you to recognize if you are the people of God, the followers of Jesus, there should be something different about you. There should be something different about you. And so he says, we abstain from certain things. We abstain from the desires of the flesh, but we embrace certain other things. We embrace good deeds so that we can glorify God, but we do abstain from the desires of the flesh. There's some things you used to do, you do them no more. That's actually a kid's church song, right? There are some things you used to do, and you're different now. You don't do those things anymore. And it's not because you think you're perfect. It's not because you look down on others. We went into depth about this last week. It's not because you think you're better than other people. You've just come to a realization because you were in covenant relationship with Jesus. You've come to a realization that those things are waging war on your soul. And so you abstain from them. I think the mantra of our culture, or one of the mantras of our culture, is follow your heart. Jason, just follow your heart. Do whatever you feel like doing. To which I've got to respond, okay, like what part of my heart should I follow? The part of my heart that's like, I'm a little hungry, it's Sunday morning, and I could down a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts like right now. Give me a box, I could eat the whole box with no problem. I just need a little bit of coffee to go with it. Or do I follow the part of my heart that wants to get in shape? Because guess what? They're both in there. Like both of those things are in there right now. But I've got to understand that I can abstain from one that is destructive for me. And I can embrace one that is beneficial. One is waging war, maybe not on my soul, but maybe a little bit, right? One is waging war on me. And the other leads me to flourishing and thriving and beauty and lets me live the way that God created me to live. So there's got to be something different about me. And so he says, live such good lives that they may see your good deeds and they glorify God on the day of his return. When we live this way, there seems to be something that slowly changes the tide of the culture around us. Because really, there's three options. When you find yourself in a culture that is opposed to you, to your beliefs, or the way that you live, you've got three options. The first option is to attack. We will violently overthrow the societal structures that we are displeased with. So you go to the French Revolution and you got guillotines set up in town square and they're bringing in the nobility one by one and chopping off their heads. Like, that's an option, I guess, right? You also have option number two, which is to assimilate, which is just like, you know what? It's just too hard. There's too many of them. We're outnumbered. We're out-resourced. I mean, they got the media, they got movie stars, and they got, who are we? I'm nobody. Remember, I'm nobody. What do? We can't beat them. Might as well join them, right? Let's just assimilate and let's just be like the culture in which we live. There's option two, but there's option three. And option three is really Peter's option, and that is that you change the culture. That you live in such a way that it would cause even those who want to harm you, even those who are opposed to you, it would cause them to glorify God because of the way that you live your life. Transformed culture through a transformed life. That's what Peter wants of us and of the people that he's talking to. And that requires that we hold firmly to our convictions, but we do it with gentleness and respect. Hold firmly to our convictions, but do it with gentleness and respect. And so the second thing, if you're taking notes, is we've got to realize our calling isn't to complain about our culture or to condemn our culture. Our calling is to change our culture. Now, I recognize some of you in the room, right? One guy said, yeah. Another guy said, amen. There's just two people, right? There's all the rest of us. And among the rest of us, some of you are thinking, yeah, I don't want to do that. Are you kidding me? Like, I don't want to sign up for that. That sounds terrible. Peter, what are you talking about? I do not want to do that. I do not want to hold fast to my convictions and be misunderstood and be slandered and have people just like push me aside and cast me out and then have no friends, but I can't fight back and I can't resist. What are you talking about? Like, I don't want to do that. And so before we dismiss Peter as dumb or naive or out of touch. Peter, you have no idea about the world that we live in. Before we do that, let's ask this question for real. Is this effective? Like what Peter is calling these people to, is it effective? Does it work? Jesus meets Peter when they're about 30 years of age, right? So we just assume Peter's probably around the same age. They meet, they start walking together. Jesus does ministry for around 3 years until his crucifixion in Judea, Galilee, Samaria. Pretty much just this tiny region. That's as far as Jesus really went physically. Then from 30 to 60 AD, 30 to 60 AD, Jesus' disciples, this ragtag bunch of followers, they take this message of the gospel. They live this way, like Peter's talking about, and the gospel spreads as far west as Rome, and it's about to go into Spain at the time that Peter's writing these words, as far south as northern Africa, as far east as India, as far north as Asia Minor, the people that Peter is writing to there. It has spread that far in just 3 decades with this ragtag group of 12 people. It's kind of amazing to think about. By 110 AD, just 60 years after Peter is writing these words to the church in Asia Minor, there is a Roman lawyer, a prosecutor, kind of like a DA, a prosecutor who's in that region of Asia Minor. His name is Pliny. And we have this letter that Pliny wrote to the emperor Trajan. And Pliny writes to Trajan, hey, I understand what you want me to do. I understand my job is to get rid of all the Christians. Okay. One problem, just one little problem, and we've been trying our best. There's so many of them, we don't know what to do. So Emperor, we're looking for a little bit of advice. Like, how do we make this happen? And this prosecutor's right, and here's what we've been doing. We just pull them out, we hear they're a Christian, we're like, all right, is Jesus Christ your personal Lord and Savior? Like, do you totally ally your entire life to him? If they say yes, we're like, okay, will you follow Jesus and say that the emperor is God as well? And Pliny's like, if they say no, we kill them. If they say yes, we kind of let them go. That's how we've been doing it. But boss, this is just not sustainable, right? We just can't keep doing it. It is too hard. There's too many people. In fact, he writes in that letter, these guys are everywhere. They're in the villages, they're in the cities. There's rich people, there's poor people. There are slaves, there are free. There are men, there are women. They're all different backgrounds. They're like, we do not know how to contain this Christianity thing. What should we do? Isn't that incredible? And that's just 60 years after this persecuted, harassed church gets a letter from Peter that says, here's what you do. Live your life in such a way that people look at your life and they are transformed to follow Jesus because of you. It's really powerful. And so, live such good lives, such good lives. How do you transform culture? Well, you find this conviction and compassion combined changes the culture. And sometimes we think those two are mutually exclusive, right? You ever met a Christian that is all conviction? You ever met one of those people? Yeah, I grew up with some of those people. Just conviction, right? No compassion at all. This is what you got to do. It's black and white, right and wrong. Like, let's go. Like, no compassion whatsoever. And that will not change the tide of culture. It won't. But also, and we got to be a little bit more careful about this one, because you can also land on the side where you are a Christian who is all compassion. And you find yourself very quickly assimilating to everything that is going on around you because you will not hold fast to your convictions at all. And because you let your convictions slip so quickly and err on the side of compassion, slowly you find that there is nothing that distinguishes you from the culture in which you live, even though that a culture is absolutely opposed to Jesus Christ. That's also trouble. Conviction and compassion combined changes culture. So Peter uses this word. He says there, live such good lives among the pagans. And we think that's harsh. He's just talking about non-believers, right? So you got believers, non-believers. The language is not as harsh as, when we hear pagans, right? Live such good lives. That word good is really important. Because typically in the New Testament, in this kind of section, the word good would be this Greek word that is agathos. And that means moral goodness. It means ethically righteous. And usually in the New Testament, around something like this, that's what it would be saying. Live in such a way that is morally good. A lot of conviction. Live in such a way that is ethically right. A lot of conviction. Peter here uses this word, kalos. Kalos means good. Live good lives. Let your conduct be holy, in other translations is what it says. Kalos means good, but it also means something that is aesthetically pleasing. It means something that is beautiful. Something that is beautiful. Something that is attractive. Something that is alluring. So when Peter says, live your life in such a way, he's not just talking about a moral or ethical goodness. He's talking about live a life that is attractive to the people who see the way you live your life. Live a life that is beautiful. Live a life that other people would look and say, man, like I would aspire to that in my own life. That's how compassion and conviction together can transform culture. Are you with me? I remember one time we're driving on a random country road in Oklahoma. I don't remember where we were. And Simi, just out of nowhere, does anybody else's spouse do this where they just randomly make noises? Like, and sometimes it's like a gasp, sometimes it's like, or something that gives the driver a mini heart attack, right? Like, you're like, what happened? Like, what happened? Did I hit a child? Like, what happened? And she's like, pull over. So I'm like, okay. We pull the car over, and I'm like, Simi, what's going on? She's like, okay, what happened? And she's like, look how pretty these flowers are. She's like, I want to take a picture. And I tell her, because she's not from Oklahoma, right? I was like, baby, those are weeds, right? It's just weeds. It's a field of weeds, right? And this is how spouses compliment each other. You know, she really gets me. She's like, Jason, relax. Look at the field of weeds. And I look and I'm like, it's beautiful. Like, it's genuinely beautiful. It's a mark of our Creator and how he does things. He has chosen, he loves you and me so much. He's like, I'm gonna make the weeds beautiful. You know, let me just give that to my kids because they deserve that. But also, it's a reminder of what beauty does. You will pull your car over to the side of the road on a random place. You will take the time to stop and admire. You might even take the time to stop and take a picture. That's beauty. And that's what Peter says our lives should be like. Oh, that in this world of speed and hustle and bustle, people would stop and be like, what is the deal with you? Like, there's something beautiful about your life. And that's how slowly we change the tide of culture. So we see in verse 13, all right, I've talked a long time, haven't I? Okay, verse 13, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake. This is how he's gonna say to do it. Conviction and compassion together changes the tide of culture. He's gonna launch into some ways we start doing this. We might pick some of this up next week, just to be honest with you, but we're gonna get as far as we can, right? Submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. He begins with this. Hey, as the people of God, you should be a people who would submit yourselves to the authorities in your life. We hate that word, submit, don't we? Like, let's just be honest, we hate that word. We're, first of all, the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. I mean, the original rebel. It is in our blood, it is in our DNA. Secondly, we're Americans. I mean, our country began with like a rebellion. Like, this is who we are. We're kind of like, we don't like people telling us what to do. We don't like people telling us how to live. That's ingrained in us. And we're people who live after like the 1960s, where everything was rebellion, right? We're gonna rebel, and some of the rebellion is good. Civil rights movement, that's good rebellion. But in the 60s, we also rebelled against like deodorant, and that's not good rebellion. Like, it's not every rebellion is good rebellion. And if you also think about it, in the 60s, I think there was a part of us that was like, we're gonna rebel against every authority. That's the way to do it, no authority. And so it's hard for us to hear a word like that, submit, but Peter says, here's one of the ways you live a life that is beautiful. You submit to authority in your life. That could be your teachers. That could be parents, could be your boss, government leaders, even leaders in your church if they're in a place of rightful authority. And he says, when we do that, we have to understand that God in his wisdom has given us this as a gift of his common grace. That some of what happens is there are people who are assigned the task of making life work, keeping people safe, commending those who do good, punishing those who do bad. Like, some of this stuff just falls on people. But notice what it also says there. It says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake. So you have a primary authority, who is God. And under this authority of God falls the authority of some other people in your life. And so, with respect and with honor, we submit to the authority of people until their authority would lead us to a place where we would go against the will of our ultimate authority. the Lord. And I think a good example of this is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Old Testament, or as my kids call them, Rakshak and Benny. And what happens with them is they're obviously people who can honor the authority in their life. They must have been respectable in honoring to Nebuchadnezzar because he keeps promoting them. And he seems to like them, right? And so they're moving up the ranks. They're moving into positions of authority and power. They must be respectful until the command comes for them to go against the will of God. And very much we see there where they're like, this is how far we'll go. We will not go against the will of God. Are you with me? And so when it comes to honoring the authority in our life, that's what it looks like. We have a supreme authority that is God, and then we have the people that God assigns in our life. He's gonna go on there to write about things like, let's look at let me just go through these verses and then kind of explain, and I'll wrap up, okay? For it is God's will that by doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. He says, like, the way you're gonna go against these people who have just given themselves over to living in opposition towards you, to attacking you and to harassing you, again, is by living this good and beautiful life. And one of the ways is by honoring the authorities in your life. I remember this in the life of my parents. I didn't plan to tell this story, but I remember it was when it was Bill Clinton and Bob Dole and Ross Perot. We're all running for president, okay? And my dad is very vocal, right? He's opposed to Bill Clinton. He's a Dole guy, and he would talk about it. And my dad was, he would do his research, he would study, he would talk about this stuff all the time, and I didn't care because I'm 12 at the time, right? So I was like, okay, Dad, Bob Dole guy. And I remember when Bob Dole lost, and I was like, I wonder what my dad's gonna do because his guy lost. Like, let's see how this goes. And we sat down for family prayer because I've been hearing lectures for months. So I'm like, let's see what he says now that his guy lost. And we sit down for family prayer, and I hear my dad begin praying for Bill Clinton. And he's praying fervently for Bill Clinton. And after prayer, I asked him, Dad, like, you prayed for Bill Clinton? And he said, yeah, he's the president. And I was like, okay, well, your guy lost. And he's like, yeah, he's not the president. And so he's like, it doesn't matter to me necessarily who wins or loses. He said, I'm gonna pray for who is in authority because my ultimate allegiance is to Jesus. And so of course, I'm gonna say, God, guide him. God, help him. God, protect him. And my dad ingrained that in me from a young age. So he had convictions in his life. And those convictions would lead him to live a certain way, make decisions a certain way, to guide his principles in his life a certain way, but also great compassion, that he would pray for anyone. He would pray for people who would speak poorly against us. He would pray for people who would be out to hurt us. He just taught me what it meant to live with conviction and compassion in every single way. And it gets all the way to verse 17, where Peter writes this: show proper respect for everyone. And that's what it boils down to. The authorities in your life, the people that you live next to, the people that you encounter on a day-to-day basis, show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. There's a special love and connection that we have with the people in our church, with the people who are a part of the church family along with you. Fear God, honor the emperor. He kind of comes back to this idea of what it means to honor those authorities in our life. But you can simplify the whole thing with that one part right there. Show proper respect to everyone. Because you know what we do? You know who we show respect to? We show respect to those people from whom we stand to gain something. That's who we tend to respect on a day-to-day basis. And Peter says that's not how it's supposed to look. That's how your culture lives. They only respect those people from who they're gonna gain something. Sometimes I'll go to a place where I feel very respected. Like if I go to Disney World, I feel very respected. I'm like, man, the customer service is amazing. They're showing me so much honor. They treat me so well. Isn't that amazing? And then I think like, I'm paying these people a fortune. Of course they're nice to me here. See, the question is how does my next door neighbor treat me? Or how does the person who stands to gain nothing from me treat me? That's true respect. And Peter, when he talks about a countercultural world, he's saying respect these emperors who, let's talk about Claudius and let's talk about Nero, terrible people, not bastions of morality or godliness. And he's like, you're called to respect them because you're called to respect everybody. He goes on to talk about people who might be poor, people who might be in a lower status in life. The church in Asia Minor is the only place where you're gonna see slave and free people sitting next to each other. The church was the only place. It was absolutely countercultural to show respect to everyone. And he starts with this fundamental point. Here's how you live a life that is so beautiful that people would look at your life and glorify God. You show respect, kindness, honor to every person, even those from whom you stand to gain nothing. And that's one thing I love about our church. If a single mom walks into this church and she's trying to wrangle 3 kids and she's having a hard time, I know this is a church where people would go to her and be like, what can we do for you? Like, we got your back, whatever you need. She would be shown the same value, honor, and respect as, let's talk about if the president walked into this place. It would be no different because that's who God has called us to be. And it comes from the fact that our Savior was kind to us while we were still sinners, while we had done nothing right, while we had not gotten our act together, while we were absolutely needy of his grace and his goodness. He gave his life for us. So we are the people who will show this world through compassion and conviction what true beauty is and what the will of God is. Amen? All right, I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna let you go because I took a little bit too long. So we're not gonna sing a song at the end. You guys sing in the car on the way home. Play some music loud, sing at the top of your lungs. But that gives me a moment to pray, to pray maybe a little differently this morning. This is who our church has to be, right? I don't want this to be a place where we just come into an echo chamber where everyone thinks the same thing and we just yell and complain about the world around us. I don't want this to be a place where you come into these 4 walls and you're like, yeah, we're gonna go to heaven and we love the Lord and forget the rest of them. Like, that's not who we're called to be, right? I pray that we are a people who would live such good lives that those around would look and desire to glorify God because of the beauty they see in our lives. That's who we're called to be. So through conviction, we're a church of great conviction. I understand that. Through conviction, but also with radical compassion, I pray that we would change the culture around us. I pray for your families to be transformed because of your presence in those places. I pray for your workplaces to be changed because you go there, right? I pray for your classrooms to be different because you sit there and you're so different than all of your peers that people maybe for a season would make fun of you or cast you out, but eventually they would come to you and be like, man, whatever it is that you got, like, I need that in my life. That's what we've seen in the early church. I pray that's what we would see today and that we would change the culture around us. Amen? Let's pray for that and give ourselves to that. Lord.